team. Behind me are a few individuals there. That's the original Turn and Burn, the folks that help make America. But you know what? I'm very proud of what you, the Mean Green Machine, are doing in Minneapolis right now, just like you've done it across the United States over these past tough 9 months. And I want you to know that you're the modern day equivalent. Turn and Burn. Makes me very proud. I also want you to know that I've got your back now and always. I love you, I support you, and I salute you.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Come in. Jeffrey Epstein.
Welcome back, Brace.
Why, thank you, Liz. And in fact, I'll take this opportunity to introduce myself once again to our audience. My name is, indeed, Brace.
I'm Liz.
And I am producer Young Chomsky.
And this is TrueAnon. Hello. It
Hello.
is not canonically, but it is a little bit of a special edition.
Yeah, you wanted, I realized actually, yeah, you were like, when we were talking about doing this episode, you're like, we're going to do a special report.
I don't know. I just like the use of special report music.
But this is coming out at the regular time of an episode because they don't know we didn't record an episode last Friday. It doesn't matter. We're doing a special report.
Cue the music.
Cue the music. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our special report. Cue the music once again, but just for a brief moment. And we are doing that because I just got back from Minneapolis, just like from the Dictator song. And I got to be honest, it sounds like I'm making one of those jokes like, boy, are my arms tired, I flew back. But I really am so sleepy. And so it's going to be a rough episode.
No, it's not.
For the listeners, it's going to be amazing for us. Yeah, but I spent Wednesday to Saturday in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tell you about it, Liz.
I would love for you to tell me about it. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Really, just straight off the bat.
What?
Some listeners who are not visually impaired may have seen this, but you procured a Jacobin press pass.
Okay, well, I want to
I
do
have a question.
Yeah.
First of all, I believe did you make that?
It doesn't matter who made it, right?
Well,
I mean, all it matters is it's made.
Why didn't you make it a TrueAnon one? You literally already are. You have a podcast. You are a co-host of a podcast called TrueAnon. Why do you have to fake being part of another publication when you're already part of one?
Interesting question. And there's a lot of answers that I could give you, and I'll give you the one that most closely resembles the truth. For a number of years, but it's also numbers of years. For numbers of years, I have been presenting myself with varying degrees of honesty, although never actually achieving the level of plain honesty, as a member of certain press organizations when I believe that would benefit me, if that makes sense. So even prior to us starting this podcast, if I, on occasion, wanted to go to something that might be easier to go to if perhaps I were a reporter for The Atlantic or The Nation.
Yeah, classic move. Nothing weird there.
Because I was red-pilled on a fact a long time ago, which is that press passes are fake. They're not real. Right. There are things like city press passes, which
They're
are
not,
kind
notarized.
Of real. They're like, but they have like a thing.
They should make them now notarized, just to make journalists have to go to a notary.
There are, yeah, I know. By the way, that is a side hustle I've been thinking of dabbling in for a long time, but unfortunately,
I just had to have something notarized, and
it's awesome. Stamp, so cool. But press passes aren't real, and so you can just make one. It doesn't have to be. I wouldn't suggest that you make one saying that you're a member of an already existing, publication or something like that. But I made a press pass that said, yes, I'm an editor at large at
But
Jacobin
why
Magazine.
didn't you just make a press pass that said you are a co-host of the podcast TrueAnon?
Because for a long time ago, we named this podcast TrueAnon. And while I think that is an excellent name in many ways, in one way that I'm sure you know has bitten us in the ass over the years is that the name closely resembles the group QAnon.
Nobody cares about QAnon anymore.
I think you would be surprised. And explaining that fact, I have found...
I'm just saying, I think you should have a little pride.
It's not pride. I'm being duplicitous, Liz. It's not pride. And I'm not being duplicitous. What is an editor at large? Nobody knows. I could be an editor at large at Jacobin, you know? And I figure they're the least inclined to get mad at me about lying about that. And I told them after the fact that I did do it. And so that's a form of permission, right? And so, yes, I made a press pass.
I don't care about the lying. I just wish... You know,
I
think it
know.
would be nice for you to represent TrueAnon when you go.
Okay, I'll do it next time. But what if I was going to do something naughty? But anyways, I didn't do anything naughty. I was there purely as a member of the press. And I decided to go as a member of the press because, we've been reporting on it so much or we've been talking about it so much. But it's one of those things I'm like, I got to go and see it for myself.
Yeah.
You know what
and
I mean?
I'm physically banned from flying, so.
You are? Oh, because of the
Yes.
gun incident.
Yeah. The one inside my belly.
Yeah, and I love flying, as longtime listeners will know. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do, and to pray loudly the entire flight, and occasionally stand up and say 1776, which actually you'll find that in Biden's America, that was worse than saying Allah Akbar, and now it's a little bit normal. You can yell at the flight attendants the entire flight if you so wish. So I went to Minneapolis. Oh, also, one of the reasons I decided to go is I have some friends in Minneapolis. Some friends of mine were quite involved with some of the things that are happening there. And so I kind of had an easy in to get a good picture of it quite quickly from arriving. And plus, I had a free place to stay. So I got in on Wednesday night. And this is the night after Ilhan Omar got sprayed.
Yeah, can we talk? Okay.
Yes.
Hold on. Sprayed by, was it apple cider vinegar?
I believe it turned out to be apple cider vinegar, which is
wow. First of
A
all,
baffling
how far
choice.
we've come with the ubiquity of apple cider vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that used to be quite novel. I would say about 2015, 10 years ago. It was apple cider vinegar. You use that, you do that with dressings, but it's so tangy. Now it's being sprayed at politicians. It's so you just have it in your cabinet.
Yeah, it was really. I mean, I love apple cider vinegar because it gives me a delightful tang and a almost a sort of sensual shudder when I drink
zippy.
it. It's very zippy. But it is a extraordinary choice for this seemingly perked out individual to spray on Ilhan Omar. I mean, the guy, you saw the video, right?
Yeah, briefly.
It's like she's giving like a a little speech. In like I mean, there's not much to Zapruder, but she's giving like a speech to, I mean, it looks like a bunch of community members or something, like a kind of small venue, and he is like a nervous looking guy, sort of shifting around, quite unshaven, a bit maybe out of shape. And at one point, right after she calls on Christine to resign, he stands up and says something. I think it's like, "You're tearing us apart" or something like that. Yeah, and he sprays her, or he squirts her, I guess would be the correct nomenclature.
Wait, was it with like a spray bottle, or it was with like kind of a squirt gun?
It was like it was like an oral syringe.
That's right. It was an oral syringe. Okay. I forgot, but now I remember. That's so fucking weird. I just
so weird.
Pause for a second.
Uh-huh.
This man was, before he went to this community meeting, preparing an oral syringe at his home, where his 2 children live, with apple cider vinegar, and saying, "I'm going to squirt this in this lady's face." That's so weird.
There's a series of really baffling choices, but I think that there's like, I think there's kind of a lot of people like this. And I don't really even know what I mean by this, but just like sort of minorly violent psychotics across our country. The
Well,
guy's
thank
name
God
is
they're not more violent.
I know. Well, I think that they sort of lack the physical fortitude in some ways, which is good. Ilhan, though, for her part, sort of goes to punch him before he is kind of dragged away by security.
I did see it. She was cool as a cucumber too.
I know, and it's really good. Well, that gave rise to a immediate reaction on the right that it was staged.
I love that.
I know, and it was I would say like a uniform reaction. And you know,
Do you think people really believed that, or they were just like, "This is our best response"? I feel like I can't tell anymore.
I know,
which we'll talk about also a little bit with more immigration stuff. But like,
it's hard to say.
Genuinely can't tell because it's such an absurd. Look, I love a false flag.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah,
longtime listeners of this podcast understand my, interest in that, but this is not a good one.
No, it does seem like it was immediate, and it was funny because the reaction was the sort of reasoning behind that reaction was that she had moved sort of too fluidly after he had sprayed her, and that she didn't follow CDC protocols for poison control, which I think you tend not to maybe exactly follow in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, in the moment, you're like, hold on, the protocols.
But it's funny because there's a huge risk of. I think on one hand, it is actually also insane because Ilhan Omar is one of the most hated politicians in America by a certain kind of person in America who is maybe apt to do this kind of stuff. And it's if this guy had a gun instead of a syringe, it could have gone really differently. Interestingly enough, I don't think the reaction from the right wing would be that much different. Maybe a little happier, but it was, I think, one of those instances that's actually like this could have been something significantly worse, or even if there had been something sort of in the syringe or whatever that was worse, some kind of poison or something. But the immediate reaction was that it's a false flag. And I think Trump even was like, I don't know about that. Like, I don't give a shit or whatever. Like he answered some question by a reporter where he sort of dismissed the entire thing. Now, back last year in July in Minnesota, 2 state legislators got shot. In fact, 4 people in total. Melissa Hortman and her husband were murdered, and John Hoffman and his wife were severely fucked up, like injured, basically, by a guy who dressed as a police officer, went to both their houses and shot them. But do you remember?
Everyone has like completely forgotten this.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Well, there was the reaction on the right was twofold. One, it was like that Tim Walz ordered this hit.
So can we talk about that again? I'm sorry, I got to pause.
Yeah.
This idea of Tim Walz on the right as both a like communist mastermind.
Yes.
And also like a befuddled buffoon, similar to what we saw during the debate with JD Vance JD. That's a difficult, like, how do you square that circle there? Because they seem to hold both at the same time. He's like an incredible operator who is ordering false flag assassinations against his own, like, members of his own party, and also is so incompetent and inept that he like can't form a sentence, basically.
It is. I've thought about this a little bit, and I think that many of the people commenting on this understand that in some crucial ways they themselves resemble Tim Walz, sort of oafish, buffoonish, in some ways quite cowardly, incapable of meeting whatever moment that arises, which
situation.
Walz has sort of humiliated himself on the national stage a couple of times, and has withdrawn from the governor's race due to Nick Shirley's viral video, which is crazy. So he immediately started out this new thing with a surrender, but they themselves also might believe themselves capable of a Machiavellian kind of strategizing. And so maybe they see Waltz as a kind of Democrat mirror of themselves.
Mhm.
But other than that, I don't know. I also, like, it's like sometimes like right-wing people, actually this happens to everybody, but I feel like right now right-wing people just Waltz is like their focus because of like both him being like Kamala's VP and he's he's the governor of Minnesota, that they tend to create these very complex, oftentimes self-contradictory mythos around characters. I mean, Obama was I mean, they really honed in on, or
But I think
honed this
also
on Obama.
some of this, we're getting so off topic. I promise I'll steer us back. But just real quick, so much of this reminds me of the same kind of like rhetorical shit that people would pull, especially in the early years of the Biden regime
Mhm.
on the left, where they would be like, actually, he's a total mastermind. Actually, this is like the economic stuff is incredible, what we're doing, like all that kind of narrative build out or narrative scaffolding, I guess, that people would kind of like, build up in order for them to defend whatever position they felt they needed to. Anyway, it kind of reminds me of this a little bit.
Well, you also have to, I mean, Walls sort of his demeanor is sort of very like, I don't know, soft, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah, he's a bit of a soft boy.
In order to build him up as this really villainous kind of guy, you have to imbue him with all of these, I guess, traits.
Right, you've seen the ones that are like, he's a CCP plant. That's still lean with that one. I love that one. I love that.
Yeah, he was in China.
Walls is Chinese.
Waltz is he's Chinese. Remember the Tiananmen Square thing? Good God.
What a fucking
Anyways, so the reaction to that I think was really telling because it's a pretty big deal. Like there's a pair of, one successful political assassination, another political wounding. And the right immediately was like, first of all, it's Tim Walz. And you even had like, national politicians saying this kind of stuff. And then they seized on the fact that the guy had some kind of like No Kings flyer that he had in his like back seat as he was a deranged No Kings protester. And he killed Melissa Hortman because she had said that illegal immigrants should not get free healthcare or something in Minnesota. I can't remember what, but it was like they took her out because she was pro strong borders or something. But they immediately sort of like added this element where he was a liberal that did it, even though all signs sort of point to him being a kind of mentally ill conservative guy. Same kind of thing here. It's like the same thing. And also that one was sort of notable because Trump really like just downplayed it and kind of didn't mention it. And this isn't unusual for Trump or anything. And I'm not going to pretend like I, cry when any of my political enemies are hurt in some way. But generally a president would probably offer some words to try to calm down a situation or, make some noises of sympathy for even though the other person is on the other side of the aisle. It's not like they're on the other side of his aisle. They're state legislators in Minnesota. But no, he didn't. He kind of like, he sort of played into the conspiracy theory stuff there. I think he like posted some videos that made it look like it was Waltz's fault or a false flag or something. But it was a pretty extraordinary reaction. And so we see that kind of just happen with the Ilhan Omar stuff too. I mean, he posted a video on Truth Social that was just like another guy talking about, did Tim Walz really have Melissa Hortman assassinated? And like, it's kind of, I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't want to be like a Pod Save America guy about this, but it is kind of crazy that like the president is posting on his scam social media site that the governor of Minnesota had a member of his own party assassinated.
You don't need to apologize. It's completely insane.
It's totally crazy. It's just crazy.
No, the levels of grift, graft, and just like what everyone likes to call slopulism now.
Yeah.
And the pandering to a sort of like really like eager to be fooled base.
Yes.
Is fucking pathetic.
I know it is. It is. And I just, I fucking hate crazy people. I'm sorry. I hate nuts. I like nuts a little bit. I like crazy people a little bit, but I hate crazy people. And I'm just like, I'm so sick of, I guess, yeah, because populism for many people is actually just means, not that I like any other definitions of it either, but it like oftentimes just means like acting as schizophrenic as possible. And that's just like, I'm just sick of that shit. I'm sick of every form of populism that there is. It just is.
Well, it's been so successful.
Yeah, it really has.
Maybe next time we'll try it. It'll work better. Anyways,
so this was the night after she had been sprayed, and I was like, is she going to come in here with like a gun out or anything? But it was a very sort of low-key event. There was like 50, 60
I think it
people
would have been
there.
insane if she came out with a gun. What are you talking
Why?
about?
That'd be cool if she came there with a gun.
Oh my God. She's still a politician.
They can have guns.
That's not my point.
I think that
Don't act silly. You know what
I'm
saying.
not acting silly. I'm saying
I think you acted a little silly.
I'm acting a little silly. And there was some security there, although I think they were undercover. But it would be a powerful message if the next time she did give a public speech in Minneapolis, she was pointing a gun over the heads of the crowd, but ready to sort of lower the barrel at anybody who got up or shifted too much of the seat.
I will say this. She's a beautiful woman.
And I will agree with you 100% in the most respectful way possible.
I will say it so you don't have to.
Thank you.
Something real quick that I find interesting. Obviously, Trump hates her for
Yes.
reasons that I think we all understand. We all can identify.
Yeah.
But it was funny. I was reading and the like New York Times interview with the mayor, Jacob Fry. It's Fry,
Yes.
right? Not Frey.
It's Fry. Yeah.
That one
I
bugs
know.
me. That
But
bugs
it's
me.
Frey. It is Frey, but we'll call him Fry.
Whatever.
We'll be
Mr.
respectful.
Fry guy. I don't like the cut of your jib, but whatever. Anyway, he was like talking about how he got on a phone call with Trump. Trump called him. They're trying to like manage this situation or whatever they're fucking doing. And he said the first thing out of Trump's mouth was, saw you on TV. You looked great, which is, of course, like 100% the thing that I imagine Trump saying. But I'm shocked that Trump cannot see Ilhan's beauty through his own, what do I say? Racist impulses.
I'll say this, and I try to be very respectful when I talk about women. I think she's too natty for him. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. Anyway, just something I'm thinking about. I was thinking about.
But she was in very good spirits, and I ended up talking to her for a while and asking her about it, and she's like, "Yeah, I wish I could." Well, it's
that
it's not
outsider
on the
vinegar
record.
is so zippy.
But I will say that she, expressed great regret at not being able to have perhaps defended herself for just a few seconds more before the man was taken away by security. But she's a very funny lady. And I will say I humiliated myself. And so we're glad I'm wearing the Jacobin press pass because this other lady comes up and she's like, "Oh, this is my sister." And I was like, "Wow, you're so much taller than her." And I was like, "You're her sister? Where are you from?" Like, where you go? That's my sister. She just got into town. And I was like, "Oh, where are you coming from?" And she's like, "Boston." I'm like, "Boston? Why the hell are you in Boston coming here? Which is colder?" And she's like, "I don't know. I like the cold's not that bad." I'm like, "You're out of your mind." And then I was like, "Oh, you don't have an accent." I guess, well, maybe you were born here. But I said something about the accent. I'm like, "Oh, you don't have an accent." And then
Boston accent?
any kind of accent, she doesn't, it's Ilhan Omar's got like a Somali accent, she doesn't have an accent. I didn't mean anything by it. And then the lady sort of is staying there for a while. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I think I had a feeling that I was humiliating myself. And then I did realize she didn't mean it was her actual sister. She sort of meant this is my sister. And it was Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. And I felt a little chagrined by that. And it was a fine party, but yeah, it was interesting because it was like a lot of people. Also met Will Stancil, and I got to say this, and I don't want to, I don't want to psychoanalyze large groups of people, but I think I'm going to. I think a lot of
Is it
people.
large groups of people or just the single person that you're?
No, I can't even.
Okay.
That's not my business. What's going on there?
Okay.
I just want to analyze a social phenomenon real quick. I think a lot of people on the internet sort of disliked Will Stancil, like left-wing people or whatever who kind of get into like Twitter quote tweet wars with people. Dislike Will Stancil. Then he became like an object of malign fascination for very active members of sort of online right-wing communities. And then I think a lot of people who had previously been opponents of his felt some kind of guilt at, seeing somebody get so much negative attention, perhaps obviously significantly more than they deserved because there's some fucking random guy in the Midwest. And then him sort of being I guess, very vocal anti-ICE person on Blue Sky or whatever, never looked at the website, never will. And like participating in some anti-ICE activism caused him to be like a figure of valor for many on the left. And I'm just going to be like, guys, everyone just needs to chill out
Just
about
dude.
everything. You know what I mean? It's just some guy,
Yeah.
But, and he's just some guy. And listen, everybody's just some guy. But that was sort of interesting because it was the night after this incident with Ilhan Omar, and I feel like I got the impression that she was. I mean, I asked her, I was like, "What's it like to be really?" I think one of the most hated women in the country, and she had quite high. She had high spirits. She was very good natured about it because I think on some level it's so ridiculous. I mean, she's been the ire of so much, or she's had the frequent ire of so many people for so long. And it seems like she's fairly popular in her constituency still. So I just, I think there was a question over whether Trump was going to try to denaturalize her at some point. I don't think that's completely out of the question. But again, she seemed in pretty good spirits.
Well, I think that women are uniquely strong in that respect. So I'm not surprised.
I can imagine. The next morning, so I stayed at a friend's house in Whittier, which is like a neighborhood, I think, in the south or southwest of Minneapolis, quite close to where Alex Preddy was shot. Maybe like a 5-minute walk, probably less than that. But it was so cold, Liz. It was so cold there.
I mean, I spent Christmas in Lansing, East Lansing. So believe me, I know.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. But the next morning, I woke up at like 7 a.m. and one of the people I was staying with, texted me, is like, actually, hey, there's ice outside the house right now. And I walk outside, and there is indeed a white truck with 2 ICE agents sitting in it, sort of just idling in the street. And I think that somebody had just walked by and seen them and kind of reported it. And within like, I want to say 3 minutes, there was maybe 15, 20 people on the street. And again, this isn't 7 a.m. So people kind of leaving their houses. There's an apartment building nearby. So people sort of walk outside there. And then a bunch of cars pull up. And I think at that point, people are making noise. There's some sort of whistles. Not too loud. I think it's maybe a little too early in the morning for that. But like there's people blowing whistles and doing some honking. And he just takes off. But it was really kind of a crazy introduction to 2 things. One, which is the how many ICE agents there actually are there, because this is just like a random side street. Like this is just like a couple block long street of houses, like not a busy area by any means. And it just sort of shows how many are out there by the fact that this guy was just sitting there. And there, there's a question of whether maybe there's a lot of activists on this block. And they were doing that thing where they've been sending people out to sort of sit outside of people's houses, or they'll drive by people's houses and take pictures. I don't know, but it was a pretty good introduction. But it was also a good introduction to how many people are sort of involved in the I guess activism against the ICE agents there. Because I was very surprised at how many people left their houses and how many people drove up at that early in the morning.
Like, I mean, how many people was it?
I mean, like maybe 20, 25, 30 people at 7 a.m. Later, I saw it. It was like some places it was like significantly more people, and just like and other incidents that were sort of similar to this, but later in the day and in different places. A lot of people at various times, and we got started pretty soon after that. I was doing basically ride-alongs, and there was a lot of kind of journalists doing this out there, and so.
Yeah, I remember you saying there was a lot of press out there.
A lot of press out there. I mean, I didn't really see that many of them, but I heard from people that there were
so many editors at large these days.
so many. Well, no. That's a pretty high-ranking position, in fact. But essentially, like so I'm not going to pretend like I have the full picture of how everything works there, but just from what I witnessed, there are, and this has sort of been reported on a lot, and so I knew a little bit about this before I went out there. But it was kind of really good to see it firsthand. There are various signal chats for different neighborhoods or different areas of the city. And in those chats, people will say that there's suspected or confirmed ICE agents at such and such location, and people will kind of respond to that. And so there's some people who are essentially doing foot patrols, and then there's other people who are doing what's called commuting, which is driving around and looking for ICE agents. And then when you see them, you kind of chase after them. That is what I did for the majority of the time I was out there. I was tagging along with some commuters that I know. And
how would you identify them?
About ICE agents?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting because, they've been using unmarked cars, right? Like they don't ride around in like giant cars that say ICE. And they don't even really drive around in cars that you could that look like, undercover federal cars.
No, they look like DoorDash guys, is my understanding.
In fact, not only do they look like DoorDash, sometimes they will be driving around with Lyft like stickers in the windshield. Yeah. I saw a car of FBI
it's like they're
agents.
Like serving people or something. You know what I mean? It has that kind of.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them are rental cars as well.
Sure. Because they want to protect whatever.
Exactly.
And they're all getting sent to different places and stuff.
Yeah. A lot of out-of-state plates. That was pretty easy to identify them by. But I actually saw a car with FBI agents in it, wearing FBI vests and everything, going into the federal building that had a "fuck ICE" bumper sticker on it. And I heard from several people who saw other cops, or excuse me, like other federal agents with like various "fuck ICE" things in the cars. But it's interesting because there was a lot of rumors that they were like dressing up as whatever other like postmen or local police or stuff like that. I'm not going to say that's impossible for them to do. I don't think it's legal for them to do, and so I don't really think that they were doing it. But there was consequently, because they drove around in these unmarked cars and tried to keep a relatively low profile sometimes, there was a lot of paranoia, and so there was like a lot of false sightings in these chats. And I learned very quickly there was a sort of varying degrees of I don't know what you would call it, but level-headedness among various activists. And so some people would see two people just sitting in a car in a sort of inverse of whatever neighborhood watch kind of reaction that some gated community person might have to a couple of people sitting in a car. Would report it and be like, suspicious vehicle, two people sitting in it, doing nothing, and it's idling. Well, every time, I'll say this, from my experience, every time that we checked out a sighting like that, it was just two guys sitting in a car. Every single time. Every single time we went and actually to confirmed ICE sightings, we were always wearing tactical gear, always wearing plates. They were wearing civilian clothes for the most part, or, sort of tactical looking civilian clothes in some cases. But they had the vests on. And I don't think that these guys are going out with like plate carriers or anything on. I think they're very paranoid, and pistols holstered and shit like that. So the first morning we actually start cruising around and we get a call. And so there's these big chats where people can type into it, but there's also people who are sort of doing a dispatch thing. And it kind of is just like how you'd imagine like police dispatch or something. They would have people check in every once in a while, sort of say where you're patrolling. And if there was a confirmed sighting of an ICE vehicle, they would send you there, or you would kind of report on the movements of the vehicle. So people would pay, and people have. There was some people who were really good at being like, the car's going southwest on such and such boulevard, or give actual directions like that. And then there was some people who'd be like, the car turned left, and of course, you don't know.
Yeah, no, your other left.
Exactly. Pretty quickly that first morning, we do come upon a vehicle with ICE agents in it, and it's already being tailed by one car. He takes us around this roundabout several times, which the people I was riding with told me was very normal for them to do. Sometimes they would just drive around the roundabout for about 10 minutes, which
Just
and
to
these
like
are small.
annoy you.
I know, to annoy you, but I'm like, also you are annoyed too. So I don't know if
Yeah, seems a bit of a cell phone.
exactly. But they sort of brake checked the car in front of us and then get out, and it's only one ICE agent. We realize it's a guy who's riding by himself, but he goes and he sort of yells at this woman, and he takes his phone and takes a picture of her face. And I mean, we talked about this in the last episode, but this is part of the effort that they're doing to essentially build databases full of activists.
Yeah, maybe we can pause here for a second, because that's actually exactly like a new sworn declaration that was filed by Nicole Cleland, who's a 56-year-old Target corporate employee. I can't remember where she worked.
I think it's Target.
No, if it's like product department or something. I don't know.
Oh,
anyway, but she's like in corporate. And she lives in suburban Minneapolis. Anyway, she said that she was participating in legal observation within a volunteer group, similar to what you're describing, and was following a vehicle, which after a while stopped and just like was like fully blocking her path. So she couldn't like proceed anywhere. So an agent gets out of the car, addresses her by her name, and then says, "We've got facial recognition and my body cam is recording." Okay. So they said, they were like, "You're impeding all of our work. I'm going to give you a warning. If you continue to do so, we're going to arrest you." But it was just like a warning or whatever. Now, she says 3 days after that incident, she gets an email that her global entry / TSA pre-check was revoked. Side note, there's been all these anecdotes about this happening on various forums, especially the like global entry Reddit forum.
Really?
Yeah. And that like people have kind of noticed this happening for participating in these protests. She says that she's been a member since 2014. She's never been detained or arrested, ever. Because it is, I will say this about global entry, that of course is under the purview of DHS. And you can get knocked off of that for like minor arrests, because it's all for like ease, depending on not talking about TSA pre-check, but for like global entry status.
Yeah.
Anyway, she, in her sworn statement, she's like, "I've never been detained. I've never been arrested. There's no reason. I've been a member since 2014. And she claims it was from this incident with DHS, and that they're like directly, I think she called it intimidation and retaliation. And I think that absolutely could be true, where they're like, actually, we've now flagged this woman and we're going to like remove her entry. My question is if it's like specific to the person, or if now within their database, all of these activists that they're taking photos of, they're flagging internally, which is automatically knocking them off of, these other sort of privileges that they may have within a like DHS database.
There's that Ken Klippenstein article that just came out. Sorry, I had trouble saying the name, and I'm sorry about that, okay?
Don't apologize.
And they mentioned that there's this sort of like new subcategory of aggressive activists, I think it's called. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's how they are flagging most people that they're putting in this, because it's not like this woman was arrested. In fact, I think the majority of these activists are not arrested, but they are sort of on these lists now. And the guy was not subtle about it. I mean, the way that he photographed her, the woman in a car in front of us, he was very clearly doing as a way to also show the gathering crowds around there that he was doing that.
Right,
And
of
I think he
course.
snapped a couple other photos of just
Performance
people.
as much as it's,
Yeah.
DHS has declined to kind of detail exactly which tech it's using in Minneapolis specifically, but New York Times was reporting on at least two of them that we know. Clearview AI, which I think everyone knows Clearview just by
Mhm.
reputation. There were a ton of exposés, various degrees that started coming out about Clearview. I feel like from COVID, honestly.
I mean,
Like
there was
that, like
Chuck Johnson's
2020.
involvement. Yeah.
I know that's a whole nother thing. But I mean, I just, I think that name has a lot of associations, spooky associations already.
Mhm.
Rightfully so. In January, DHS said that they were limiting Clearview to just child sex abuse cases, funny enough. But they just signed a new like $3.25 million contract with them in September of last year. And they said that it would be used to investigate, this is their quote, assaults against law enforcement officers. Clearview itself is like pretty controversial. It uses facial recognition software to match within very not Clearview databases.
Yeah.
And where all of that data is being collated from and there's so much there that it would be like a whole nother episode, I think. I mean, we should do one. But they're also using this tech called Mobile Fortify, which I think maybe other people have heard about.
And we talked about that the last episode too, as well.
Along with those kind of plugging into then the real-time database that they're using, which is built by Palantir, that is combining kind of every single piece of digital footprint, meaning from like credit reports, Facebook, Instagram, anything that you have logged into, anything ever, email, like just your entire digital footprint along with government data. And it seems like they're also using, I don't know if they're using this in Minneapolis, but they recently bought up an app called BI2. I think it's BI2 and not B12.
Uh-huh.
But BI2, which basically can get an ID on a person. They're just like reading an eye within seconds up to 15 inches.
Oh,
So
wow.
they can be pretty far away. I mean, relatively. I would
Over a
say,
foot.
yeah, but like, that's clearly like, coming up to someone driving a car.
Yeah.
They don't have to get right in your face to kind of pull up an ID.
Yeah, the guy did lean like very close to, I think the woman kept the windows closed, but he did lean quite close and take the picture. The officer, he was like maybe 6 foot tall, white guy, was very jittery. I will say this, he seemed noticeably jittery.
Drugs or nerves?
Nerves. I mean, I could tell, I've seen people with this kind of nervousness before. And, frankly, in his defense, I'm not going to say defense, but, in his, to play devil's advocate for a second, if I was standing on a freezing cold street of Minneapolis next to a roundabout at 8 a.m. with like 25 people yelling, "Kill yourself" at me and blowing into whistles and honking horns, I would also be quite nervous. He gets back in the truck.
It's part of the reason they keep shooting fucking people.
Well, this is I had a bad feeling about this guy, which would to be, I'm not trying to be dramatic here. He did not shoot anybody. But I got a glimpse of a little bit of the mindset of some of these guys from this guy. So he gets back in his car. The woman he takes a picture of, she's like, "I'm going to hang back for a sec, just, so he doesn't try it again." And so we started following him. And here's an interesting, we were sort of the lead car behind him. And there was, I think, a couple others at this point too. Here's sort of the interesting thing about this whole dynamic between ICE and the commuters there is that for the most part, a lot of the local PD were kind of not around and had taken a sort of, I'm not going to say neutral position because they have, especially at the hotel, I guess by the time this comes out last week, so during some of the noise demonstrations, they're not like an actual neutral force in this, but they definitely are hanging back in a way that I found very noticeable. And so we were actually just driving like maniacs around. like speeding very quickly down the street. The cops, or excuse me, the ICE agents were doing the same thing. So we're essentially engaged in like a high-speed pursuit down fairly quiet suburban, well, not suburban, but it's Minneapolis, down fairly quiet kind of neighborhood streets, following this guy, and he's trying to lose us. And so he's like turning really quickly. He's speeding up. We're speeding through red lights behind him. He's speeding through red lights. We're going right behind him. There's a lot of adrenaline pumping. And we chased this guy for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, because he had suddenly sped up after taking this woman's picture as if he was going somewhere. He eventually loses us, but one of the people who I was in the car with had been doing this so often that he actually figured out where we could cut the guy off the only direction he could be going. And so we did take that route, and we turn onto this one street, and we actually see his vehicle there with the doors open, and another vehicle with some flashing lights on, but it's an unmarked vehicle, but with police lights on with all the doors open. We don't see him. We don't see anybody. And there's no like activists or anything around. So we get out of the vehicle, and I hear some yelling, and there's a sort of like apartment complex with a playground behind it. And I see a pair of ICE agents really struggling to arrest somebody. And I get closer, and I'm accompanied by a friend of mine, and they seem to be arresting an immigrant, somebody that they had. I don't know what had precipitated the arrest, if this is somebody they were targeting or what, but the guy that we had been following appeared to have arrived as backup for agents making an arrest. What I witnessed in the next 15, 20 minutes was some of the most bumbling, incompetent, at times very pathetic displays of police work from any uniformed officer I've ever seen anywhere in the world. I have been arrested numerous times throughout my life, and I'll be honest, I was guilty every time. But I have been the recipient of relatively professional police work in the grand scheme of things, and I've been on the receiving end of very aggressive and let's say less than professional police work. This was unlike any of that. I mean, this was like if you and your dumbest friends drank a bottle of Hornitos and then tried to wrestle a Mexican. I mean, it was like, I've never seen it like this. They are slipping and sliding all over the place.
Because of the ice? Ice on ice?
No, they're on snow. They are not on ice. But because of the equilibrium, or not the equilibrium, because the weight of the vests that they have is so heavy that they're actually kind of unable to move effectively. Sure. The guy there trying to and failing to arrest maybe a guy's like 5'3", and they kind of end up just like, at one point, I have video of this, which maybe I'll post. I did post some of it on my personal Instagram, but I'll post some in an addendum to this episode or something. At one point, after they handcuff the guy, or maybe they're trying to handcuff the guy, like one agent is holding him and the other agent just pushes him, like to fuck with him. But by pushing the prisoner, it knocks the other agent off balance, and they just all fall into the snow. At this point,
problem with being like so geared up.
Yes. And just also they're like, you can tell that they're really hyped up. And like they don't really know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
At this point, other people are starting to arrive. They're backup. They don't have backup. It's just these three guys, these three ICE agents. But other activists are starting to arrive until there's a crowd of maybe 15 there. They're behind this fence, and there's two of the ICE agents and the prisoner behind the fence, and then one sort of patrolling in front of it. And it's a fence that's maybe like 3 feet high. It's like a little fence that probably it's usually has a lawn behind it, and they can't figure out how to get out of the fence, and they are panicking. The fence very clearly has a gate slightly further down. I don't know if it needs a resident to open it, but it is again, this is a 3 foot tall thing. Pretty sure you can just open it from the inside. One of the residents closest to them for the apartment building is yelling at them and whistling, and they're being yelled at from now behind and people on the street. And the officer that we had been chasing earlier starts panicking. And I found it pathetic, actually. I mean, I don't know how there's another way to put it. And I'm actually shocked that he would allow himself this display of emotion in front of this large crowd, but he starts picking up his phone. He calls someone on his phone, presumably other officers, and starts like in a really panicked voice, like, "Where are you guys?" Like he does this several times. I think I got it on video twice. In fact, we should play a portion of that right now. So he does that multiple times, and he grows increasingly panicked. And his partner is the guy that's like now trying to like handcuff the guy that they got, and he's just pacing back and forth and shaking. Not only is he shaking, but the guy that's sort of protecting them on the outside is also really tense and just pacing back and forth. And he takes out a giant can of pepper spray or mace and starts shaking it. At this point, a woman that is friends with the people I'm with comes up, and she is asking the guy being arrested what his name is, because oftentimes people will just be snatched and their families or friends, and nobody will know what happens to them. And so you're supposed to try to get their names. When she goes up to do that, and she's not being aggressive, she's not raising her voice or anything, she's certainly not making aggressive movements or trying to get over the fence. When she goes to do that, the guy that's sort of on patrol outside the fence goes up to her and points the mace can directly in her face and sprays her. And kind of gets it all over me. Not over me, excuse me, gets it all over her. But like it goes on like other people as well. I get a little bit in my mouth, and a friend sort of takes her back in the car. It turns out her dad's there and gets really pissed off. And at this point, backup arrives. The ICE agents still can't figure out how to get the prisoner around the fence. They can't figure out the gate. And so they end up just having a bunch of them climb over the fence and lift the guy over and put him on the outside. And then the problem is now the prisoner and like one or two ICE agents is on outside of the fence, but all the cops are so tired and out of shape that they're unable to get back over the fence because they keep falling. And they're not falling on ice. They are falling because they're physically unable to scale a 3-foot fence.
This seems too comical.
I counted 8 falls.
I feel like there's too many jokes about being fenced in, about...
it was, build a wall. Yeah, it was, yeah.
I don't even want to say it. But I know that like the kind of keystone cop of it all has been remarked upon by various reporters. But I think it's, they really downplay it, obviously, because these guys have, they all think that they're they all have like main character video game syndrome or whatever, where they all literally are like narrating it as if it's like a fucking I don't know, action game or whatever that they're the guy in. It's almost like too obviously pathetic or something.
Well, which
almost makes me uncomfortable.
I know it was, and in fact, that's when I was like, "Oh shit, is this?" Because the particularly nervous agent, who was still very visibly like shaking and unable to scale this fence, I was like, "Is he going to take the gun out?" Because I could see that he was clearly in his head, the situation had gotten out of control.
Right.
And to be clear, like there were activists around there, but there wasn't like a riot or, like no one was throwing shit at them.
They were like in their faces.
But not even these guys' faces. Like, no, the other guy was keeping a perimeter. Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah, they weren't in their faces. I mean, they were a little bit, but it didn't seem like it was like about to pop off or anything like that in like a violent way. But this guy was like, hands sort of reaching, like you could tell that he was kind of like going towards his gun. But I'm pretty sure, it's been reported that they had an order like, don't take out your guns, like don't, they were supposed to kind of like not calm tensions, but they didn't want a repeat of the previous two, the Good and Preddy shootings, especially so close to each other, because I think that they realized that would be quite bad for DHS. And so this guy kind of like, he didn't really know what to do. At that point, a activist sort of falls or kind of like tries to put herself on the body of the guy who's being arrested. I'll say this. I thought it was a really bad idea. Everyone kind of was very confused by this because all that ended up happening was she was just immediately, they took down her glasses and mask, pepper sprayed her in the face, and then handcuffed her and put her in her car. I'm like, that seemed like pretty obvious that was going to happen to me. Or to me, that seemed fairly obvious that was going to happen. But I think it speaks to a certain dynamic there that struck me as quite common throughout a lot of these incidents. That there's a lot of adrenaline that goes through your body when you're like chasing these guys, right? Like the ICE officers. And then you catch them. And then there is this sort of like standoff, and there's this sort of tense situation. And when we got there, we sort of had them on the defensive a little bit. I mean, not in like a way where if they particularly should have felt threatened or anything. And just speaking objectively, like it was not a very threatening offense. And I was there as a journalist. I was just taking videos. But you're kind of unable to kind of consummate this, I guess, if that makes sense. Like the closest thing that I could compare it to was like going to battle or war. Because most of the time in war, you're sort of driving around or you're stationary, but you're like looking for an enemy, or you're like kind of like on edge, like an anticipation of it. And then that culminates, or doesn't, but can culminate in some sort of like exchange of fire or whatever. But in some kind of battle. Whereas this is actually not that. This is, you have this sort of like tense standoff, and it feels, and you almost like, and there's a sort of like heroic feeling to it, but then it ends in like a kind of, and I don't say this in a, I think I'm sort of speaking objectively
there's
here.
nowhere for it to go.
There's nowhere for it to go. There's an impotence at the end of this, right? That I definitely think that sort of everyone felt. So you have these like moments of like, spiking adrenaline of this excitement, of this rush. And then there's no like consummation.
There's no release.
There's no release. And like sometimes the prisoners have gotten away. I don't know if that's because of activists. I haven't seen that happen. I've seen videos of that happening in general. But beyond that, it's a defensive sort of action. And it's a defensive action. It's more of a delaying action because in this instance, they still got the guy. And not only did they get the guy, they got some random lady too. And all we did was just sort of make it worse for them. And there is a certain, I'm not going to say we because, again, just neutral party here. But there is something to be said for that, for like delaying them or making it more difficult or damaging morale. But it is certainly like it's very unequal as to what you can do, And so I don't know. There was that's true, I guess, of a lot of various kinds of activism. But in this case, it was so like, you have these two groups opposing each other and sort of standing off, but you can't like fight. And, I know there was that video of Alex Preddy that came out, right? Like a week before he got shot, kicking the tailgate off of a ICE car. Remember that?
Well, yeah. The one that everyone was like, that's AI.
Yeah, which that was really depressing to see how many people immediately assumed that was AI. And then even after it was clear, I mean, it was always clear, but after it became even more clear it wasn't AI, stuck to that story because I think that's a bad road to go down too. But people were sort of like, I think a little defensive about it, but I completely understood exactly why he did that. Because you have this frustration, right? Of like, you're unable to stop this thing in a real way. And you have this kind of like energy flowing through your body and mind, your mind and this frustration at this impotence. And yeah, so I'm like, it seems very understandable that he would kind of kick something. Yeah, I don't know. It is it's a dynamic that I've experienced in other ways before, but never this acutely. Like, this isn't too dissimilar than like sort of facing off with the cops at a protest or something like that. Although actually it is a little dissimilar because like you can sort of, there's scuffles with them or whatever, even though they oftentimes are almost always greatly outmatched protesters. But in this, like we far outnumbered them, or the people that I was, these activists far outnumbered them. But they still, despite that, were unable to actually prevent them from doing this.
I want to talk a little bit about the arrests that they're doing, because I think that some of what's going on is explained by some of the contradictions within the administration and their own stated goals and their like political goals. But while you were in Minneapolis, there's a big story that came out in Washington Post about DHS buying up this like huge network of large industrial warehouses all across the country to turn them into new detention sites. Kind of very frightening piece. Something about like close to 170 million in warehouse and property buys that they're reporting. Though I don't think that, they kind of make it clear in the reporting. They're like, I don't think that's all that's being bought up.
Yeah.
It's just what has been identified so far. Some of these warehouses are like enough to house close to like 10,000 people. So they're huge. They have operational targets, allegedly. Again, they don't come out and say this stuff, but their operational targets are hitting 3,000 immigration arrests a day, which is a lot. That would push like detention capacity towards 100,000, which is, I think it should be obvious, but if it's not, there are not that many immigrants with criminal records in this country with violent offenses, right? Which is one of the reasons why they are expanding their scope to meet these quotas. And some of that is directly coming from Stephen Miller. Like the demand for these quotas and stuff. But so this is just some like sheer numbers from the last year. This is from the Deportation Data Project, which, there's all these watchdog, I guess you could call it, groups that are trying to parse deportation, immigration data, which is very complicated because the numbers that are coming out of the White House are so fucked up and fake.
Yes.
On like every, whether it is about this or about employment or whatever, it's just a kind of a disaster in terms of reporting. And it's not just that they're juiced. It's like it's really unclear exactly like how they're juicing. So you can't even like de-juice them, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. Like it's not exactly clear where the numbers are even coming from.
Right. So this one I think is affiliated with UC Berkeley. One of the things that I think is important to kind of just, to pull back, this makes sense also from what we talked about in the last episode we did on this, but interior deportations have exploded while basically nothing is really going on at the border.
Yeah. That's as far as I understand that to be the case. Yeah.
So, deportations following ICE arrests inside the U.S. are up 4.6 times in the first 9 months of Trump 2. Arrests have quadrupled overall, but the composition of those arrests has completely changed. So now street arrests are up 11 times from what they were previous. And the kind of like transfers from jails and prisons has only like doubled. So we've never seen like street arrests at this scale. This is all historically new. I think anyone with eyeballs can say that.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to also be backed up by the numbers here. There has been a whole shift away from criminal priority targeting, which again, I don't think that our listeners would be surprised about any of that. But there are people who either because of whatever news world, whatever they live in, do not understand this and still
Yeah.
believe this shit about the, rape gangs or whatever and going after these like violent criminals or what we talked about it on the last episode, that fucking horrifying DHS website, Worst of the Worst,
Yeah.
where they're trying to put forth that they're going after, they're eating the cats or eating the dogs or whatever.
That website, by the way, is very interesting because, some of the offenses that you see in that, I mean, some of them are like weed and shit like that. But some are like murder. And you're like, well, this guy's out? Like, how did that
Right.
happen? But it turns out they're actually just taking them in some cases after they're getting, like, while they're being released from prison.
Right.
Like, and that actually accounts for a huge number here. But it is they're juicing not just even the numbers, but they're juicing the framing of it as well.
Totally. Arrests of people with no criminal convictions has increased 7 times.
Yeah.
So arrests of people with nonviolent convictions, that could be anything from like a DUI to there's so many that you see that are just, anyway, nonviolent convictions doubled, while arrests of people with violent convictions is only up just shy of 30%. So the entire, the growth of everyone who's being arrested is overwhelmingly non-criminal, particularly with street arrests. Now, the street enforcement that we're seeing is central because of all of the quota demands, right? And this is like really important because this is something that I know we've said on the show before. I know that we've written about on our newsletter before, but like hitting mass deportation targets is mathematically impossible if ICE only focuses on people with serious criminal convictions, full stop.
Yes.
So they will not be able to hit these targets that are coming out of the White House unless they expand. And this is where detention comes in. And this is where, just to go back to the Washington Post story, like, deportations are rising not because the cases that are like put forth in these courts are weaker. In fact, it's the opposite. Detention capacity has tripled, and through administrative and legal wins, they basically made release kind of essentially impossible. And so it's forcing faster and faster removals, along with people just basically, once they're in these fucking centers, are like, I will leave.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to fucking be there. So it's not because suddenly there's all of these criminals where they're like, oh, we can just deport them so fast. It's literally because, the system's so overwhelmed that they're just like pushing them out. And at the same time, by the way, legal labor inflows are continuing apace, if not increasing. So we've already expanded the work visa pathways to keep up with the labor demands because all of the corporations are terrified of the shortages that they're facing because of all of these arrests. Again, that's why they're moving into street arrests, and out and away from kind of targeting these major culprits of hiring illegal labor or whatever in the country.
Well, I mean, and Trump has signaled that. I mean, the signals or the statements from the administration have been wildly contradictory at times. There's been, they've said, oh, we're just going after these guys with these are criminals, these are hardened criminals. And then on the other hand, someone will say, like Stephen Miller, for example, well, everybody who crossed the border illegally is definitionally a criminal. So they're all criminals. So actually everybody 100% of who we're deporting are criminals. At the same time, Trump has said, he says frequently, rather, I shouldn't say has said, because he actually he said it from the beginning as repeated as recently as last week or a week before, that certain industries, they should be left alone. I think hotels, he had mentioned it a couple times, because clearly he has some probably friends who own hotels and are like, listen, we're paying these guys like $3 an hour. We can't have you, deporting them. We're gonna have a labor shortage, or our bottom line is gonna be fucked with, and that's not gonna be good for the economy. And so it is. But then they have these very performative statements and then gestures. I mean, they have real ones as well, but then performative ones at the same time, where they do these like, high profile not sting operations rather, but like operations, like the Chicago bullshit, like descending on that fucking building in Chicago, which is so crazy. And obviously like a lot of reporting's come out about that specific raid. I don't think they got like 2 people or something, it's like they're expending massive amounts of resources for essentially like hype videos.
No, and that's kind of the huge contradiction at the heart of all of this, which is like the state is maximizing removals for political signaling to the base that it needs to show like, hey, we're doing our big tough muscle moves, and we're also beating up left-wing activists, and we're also capturing all the brown people, and we're also, whatever. But in these sort of like, huge theatrical content pieces like you're talking about, while at the same time having to maximize legal admissions for economic stability that all of the interior enforcement now threatens.
Yeah.
And so the only way to kind of reconcile or try to kind of reconcile those two things is through more expansion of these kind of like thuggish street arrests that are pretty like unlimited in scope, because there's if you do that, then you're not threatening anything and you're giving meat to your base. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, I do. I mean, it's the entire thing. We talked about this a little bit last episode we did on this, but like, I mean, think of even the entire reason that they're going after Minneapolis in the first place. Right. Minneapolis isn't like a nation-renowned hotspot for undocumented labor or anything. It came because of a Nick Shirley viral video on Twitter, and that was about the Somali population there.
Can I just say, I think Shirley is a tough last name.
Surely you can't be serious.
It's a tough one. It's an effeminate last name. Let's be honest. And not that there's anything wrong with that. There's little that's right with it. Let's say that. But it's interesting because obviously that targeted the Somali population. Vast majority of the Somali population are legal citizens. Huge numbers of them have been born here, second generation. And, the actual, arrests that are happening in Minneapolis, all of the people that I talked to, and I talked to a lot of people, everyone's like, yeah, every single person we've actually seen them go after has been like Latino. That's been essentially it. Like they're just here to kind of make a scene because of a viral video. Like they've been sent here. And so like, that is, I mean, that's not like, there's not like a partisan spin on that. That just is the fact. Like that was the cause of, well, no, I mean that the attention is because of Operation Metro Surge. The cause of it, I guess the cause of Metro Surge, because the viral video came a little later, was because of I guess the virality of the Somali fraud story, the big fraud case there. That like the attention that was getting on Twitter, which caused the Nick Shirley viral video, but it also caused Operation Metro Surge. I kept thinking like, it's okay. I can't extrapolate too much because obviously different neighborhoods have different populations of immigrants, different, they're doing different, they maybe are focusing in different places each day. But what I was there, and I was there for 3 full days, and I saw ICE agents a lot. I saw a lot of ICE agents. I saw exactly one bust. And I think there was exactly one bust that anyone caught in this entire quite large zone that I was sort of riding along on these patrols in. There was a lot of ICE agents, a single bust. And it seemed like what they were mostly engaged in were these sort of cat and mouse games with activists. And everybody, I think, has kind of come to the conclusion that like, this is about immigration in one sense, but like really for a large part, it's also just about this sort of public war on activist types and like, the Democratic mayors and governors of these places and these sort of enemy cities that they've identified. But if I was somebody whose main thing was busting illegal immigration, actually, if my main thing was that, I would probably be content with this because it seems like a lot of the people that whose main thing that is are very stupid and publicly very excited just by these viral videos or whatever. But it's very obvious objectively, like if you're trying to get as many undocumented immigrants out of the country as possible or catch as many as possible, these sort of like random street busts are probably not the way to go about it. Like driving down the street and questioning every Somali that you see or every Latino that you see, which they can do with these sort of newly legalized Kavanaugh stops and this new sort of warrantless shit that they're doing.
Yeah.
It's not actually an effective way to get immigrants out. And I don't think that it comes as a surprise to anybody that's listening to this. But it is sort of shocking to actually see it in person. The rest of that day we followed one agent and then basically drove him back to the federal building and then ended up in a Target parking lot because they often stage at Target and just sort of staked that out for a while, didn't see any, and then went and found another agent, another pair of agents, or was directed towards it, and they also just sat in their car for a while. Until we called it off. And then the next night, and then I sort of kept on the horn for the rest of the day, and it didn't seem like there was anything else that happened. The next day, there was that big march. And so I went down to the federal building to Whittier, which they're operating out of. And I watched all these DEA agents, all these FBI agents sort of parading in and out. And they've put up these barriers so that people can't get into the street anymore. It was interesting to see. It was bitterly cold. I stayed there for, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes and watched it. And then we just went back on, I guess, kind of patrol. And I this is less about the actual ICE agents and sort of more about the dynamics of the protests. So, again, there's been a lot of reporting, a lot of mainstream reporters sort of riding along with these people. And so I'm not trying to really recount. And I mean, you can read whatever, like the New York Times or whatever. I'm sure they sent people out and did it. I kind of want to comment more on the dynamics of this sort of decentralized activism versus maybe a form of centralization and what the pluses and minuses are of each. And so, there's these signal chats that are sort of loosely run. And I'm not going to pretend I have actually also, by the way, the full picture here because I wasn't engaged on any level but the level that I was engaged on, which was basically at the street level of people riding around. Mm-hmm. But I talked to a lot of people who operated at various levels of this. And the picture I got was there was these sort of signal chats that weren't really run by any particular organization, despite Kash Patel saying on the Benny Johnson podcast that they were investigating these signal chats for ties to activist groups. And I think on one hand, there was a sort of mass engagement with this stuff on a level that I haven't really seen outside of a few specific things. I mean, there was a lot of, I guess you could say, normie libs that were pretty heavily involved in this. You drive down the street and there would be a few kind of just random middle-class people sitting at an intersection with not a barricade, but they would sort of put some stuff in the street so you'd have to weave around it to slow down ICE vehicles that were sort of patrolling through their neighborhoods. There was, I have no idea what the numbers are, but there's a lot of people. It was mobilization on a neighborhood level that I have not seen before. I mean, it was extraordinary in to see it in many ways. But there's some real limitations in the structure that I don't know if people even want to overcome. I'm not gonna say that. I'm sure some people do. I'm sure some people don't. But there is no guiding, as far as I could tell, and I asked people about this, there's no guiding organization behind this. There's no central committee that has a solid political line or whatever, or there's no sponsorship by this or that party or organization over the whole thing. It's sort of something that sort of developed like it has in other cities somewhat organically or mostly organically. And then it's been adopted by various organizations that have dispatched people or whatever, but there isn't a real cohesive coordination. And so the way it works is there's various chats in different neighborhoods or different sectors of the city, and they are siloed off from one another, which I think is a good idea. And there are specific people that work as relays between them. And then again, a dispatcher. the problems that you run into is that there's no like centralized training or anything like that. There are trainings that happen, but like there's no central body that like standardizes a training. And so you'll have people, and you don't need to go to any in the first place. You can just like get invited to one of these chats and start doing it. And so you have people who, again, like don't know how to call out directions, or who will say inflammatory or like even conversational things over this like line that's supposed to be kept clear, except for like dispatching. And then you have people reporting rumors, which was actually a huge thing that I discovered, is that like a lot of people, there was a lot of
misinformation.
A lot of misinformation.
Not even on not saying on purpose, just like.
I think it's possible some of it was, but the stuff that I encountered, yeah.
That goes back to the adrenaline thing that you mentioned, which is that when you're kind of in that moment and in that state, you get excited to share and be a part of it. And maybe it is working against some better impulses, Yeah.
That's what it felt like. And like, it's, and I'm not knocking anybody here. I mean, it's a fairly natural phenomenon that occurs.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But yeah, you'd have people sort of like, saying, there's these two guys sitting in a truck, and it's like, well, okay, well, why don't you just walk up to them and see what they're wearing, And so I'm sure that there's probably a lot of people who are sort of just being followed around, probably don't even notice it, by like a car, because they look like they might be an ICE agent. Yeah, which was funny. I mean, we ended up doing that at one point. We followed these people at the behest of somebody else, and all of us were kind of like, I don't think this is an ICE car. And then they were finally just like, fuck it, like pull up beside them. And we pull up beside them, and it's just like three guys going to work. And we're like, come on. But, I think when a lot of like big events happen, and I'm talking anything from like a war to, a conflict in a neighborhood, people might sometimes take like the maximalist position that like everything crazy is always happening. And so you believe everything that you hear. But there's a certain amount of discernment that I think, and this is maybe just advice to our listeners and general advice in your life. There's a certain amount of discernment where you have to like, at first, when you encounter information, you say, okay, well, does this track with what I know to have happened in the past? Yeah, or does this track with what I know to be within the realm of possibility? Or does this track with what I know to be physically possible in some cases? And if it passes those tests, then investigate further. But it's always really important to take a deep breath and not believe everything you hear, but also just not repeat everything that you hear without verifying it or having it verified.
Which, by the way, social media is training us not to do.
I know. It is so opposite of like many of the instincts that you sort of get from using a lot of social media.
Yes.
I noticed that I didn't notice, actually. I don't know why I said that, but I talked to many people who noticed that there was significantly less sort of adventurism than there had been during 2020. People sort of, striking out on their own and doing maybe some spectacular stuff that had little political value. It is, it's an interesting thing. Like I was saying earlier, there's a certain level that you can go to, and then you kind of can't go further than that. And I think that, and you can't go further than that because A, that's just like not the conditions that the US are in. But B, I think logistically and organizationally, it sort of doesn't allow for that. I mean, this is sort of a mass thing. Like this is, it's like very intense activism, but it's done on a more mass basis than I've seen before. And because of that, that means the general political development of the people that are in it is rather low. And because of that, you can get people who either really tends towards quite a conservative approach to things, or actually a quite adventurous approach to things. Both are both are sort of symptoms of this. And I'm not really sure what the solution to that is. I'm not sure that there is necessarily should be a solution, because one might kind of, things actually, as far as things are going, they seem to be going decently well. And I talked to people who are fairly centralization minded, and they had some positive things to say about the decentralized aspect of it, while acknowledging and talking about the drawbacks to it. I think, though, if things do reach another level in terms of internal conflict in the U.S., a degree of centralization would be necessary. But it was also unclear that if that was even possible, because it doesn't seem, and this is true nationwide, there's no group that is able to have that either charismatic authority or logistical organizational authority. And that was something I sort of noticed there as well. That even if a group wanted to sort of be the one that directed all the efforts, it didn't really see. And the various groups were involved. I think PSL has quite a large presence there in terms of the marches and stuff like that. But in terms of the actual that street level activism of the driving around and the patrols, there wasn't a central coordinating body. And that's maybe, it's also on the level of infiltration, of which there's HSI agents out there. It's and there's also right-wing people who are really sort of dedicated to countering this stuff, but often mostly from out of town. They're having to do on the internet. It's okay, you can infiltrate this chat, but most people are using code names or nicknames or whatever. And there's only so much you can do. ICE knows where you are, but the whole point is that you're supposed to be going to where ICE is. So they'll know where you are anyways, and you're not you're broadcasting your exact location at all times. And so I will say as in terms of balancing out that, there are people, I talked about some people, there is a certain kind of person really fetishizes a OPSEC, I guess you could say. And I think out of
an unnecessary degree.
Yes. And it is necessary, but then sometimes people to make a fetish out of it and I think it sometimes comes from a certain political frustration that you can't, it replaces politics for some people.
Yeah.
I should say.
There's also just there is a hard limit on what is possible in terms of that when you're doing stuff online or digitally.
Yeah.
There's a hard limit that you reconcile with then what you're doing politically, rather than try to go further into OPSEC that isn't actually going to do anything, and then that becomes that fetish. You know what I'm saying?
I do exactly. I mean, if you're and this is I'm using a really hyperbolic example here. I just want to let people know that. But if you're playing some violent action or whatever, and you're doing that on your phone, well, it's you're already no matter OPSEC that you do, you're already kind of fucked or whatever.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Or maybe you're not fucked, but you're taking a huge risk there. And sometimes, I don't know. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. There are limitations to the use of phone and to use of these communication devices in the first place, and these giant signal chats and all this stuff, that you have to accept those limitations and work around those limitations rather than pretend that you can obviate or alleviate those limitations. It's the thing is though, I don't really know what more people can do. And there's always sort of online interlocutors who urge other people to do something that they themselves are not doing. How come you're not shooting an ICE agent when they're arresting somebody or something like that?
Bad idea.
It just, I think it is quite a bad idea. Or
TrueAnon recommends against that.
Yeah, I would say we're definitely not encouraging it. And that is, I think it will probably backfire in many ways on you. But there are people who view mass action, every mass action, whether it's a spontaneous one or whether it's one that's organized, as an immediate prelude to some sort of revolutionary moment, right? And that just isn't, history doesn't bear that out, but also resistance to something does not equal a revolution against that thing. So there are probably quite a lot of people who are engaged in this sort of activism who do not wish, in fact, I would say the vast majority of people do not wish for a revolutionary overthrow of the United States. And wishing that were true doesn't make it true. And so it's people who might wish that were so, you actually have to engage with those people and attempt to persuade them to your political ideas rather than hoping that the actions that they take will lead to a somehow innate understanding of your arcane political ideology. And that's, I don't know. It is it's interesting to see. But I think that what the main lesson that I saw there was, besides just being able to witness just how out of control these ICE agents are, and it was frankly quite exhilarating that we kind of went on high speed chases throughout the city, like every couple hours. The other lesson is just that, like, I don't think that this is sustainable for them, that what they can do, like, they're going to have to draw down at some point. I don't want to extrapolate just from the neighborhood or the area numbers that we were in for deportations, but like, if that is at all similar to what they were doing elsewhere in the city, I mean, they got 3 guys that day, and they're spending like 16, 15, $20 million a day on having these agents there. I don't know if they're adjusting their tactics after sending Bovino home. Well, they sent him to Vegas, I guess, or he's taking a little break in Vegas right now. But it seems like as activists adjust their tactics, the DHS or the federal government is adjusting theirs, because it's not just DHS. There's I think it's like half of the DEA is out there too, or is engaged in deportation stuff. A huge number of FBI agents are. I mean, it's a whole of government.
Like, they've also opened up USPS also involved. Like, they've tapped into like almost every agency that you could think of.
Yeah. It is a whole of government approach. And I don't know. I wonder how they'll approach this on the next city. I mean, they're deploying people to other cities, but the next like real big surge that they do in the same targeted way. I mean, I left with the impression that this was, whether it was intended to, I think it was, it has certainly become a war from the federal government against maybe their most vocal or active opponents, which would be the people who would be willing to engage in this kind of activism. And the immigration stuff was still very important to the government, but that seemed like it's secondary. Whereas before, I might have flipped those a little bit. That seemed absolutely. I mean, there was agents that we followed whose job seemed to just be to fuck with activists, and there's only so much they can do as well. Like, there's a certain level of like that you can't just like. I mean, they could. They drew their guns on that lady the other day, but like they can't. There's a certain limit to what they can do, and I think that they're testing those limits now. And cohering maybe a strategy for future cities in Minneapolis. Well, I'll say this. It was nice to be back in Minneapolis and not have pneumonia.
Oh my God. I'm just glad you didn't get it again.
I know. Wasn't it freezing the last time we were there? I feel like it was.
Yes, but not like this. This has been a historic cold all throughout the United States, and more's coming. Get ready.
I know.
That's according to all the natural gas traders I follow.
Yeah. Really? Yeah.
Those are the guys that know when the weather's changing.
No, that's the heating oil traders.
No, the natty gas guys are... I'm going to call it that from now on, natty gas. They're the best because they're like all up in these like polar flows and shit. And I'm like, oh man, you're on this. And they were right. I mean, you can look at natural gas prices. On the side, if you want to like start trading that.
Yeah, I know. I got some barrels in the office. Since you've been home.
You do physical.
Liz, you don't understand. Since you've been home, our studio is, I would say, floor to ceiling oil and gas.
Sure. Physical.
It is just barrel after. Yeah, physical. Well, I'm sorry. What? Yeah. I'm buying fantasy oil?
No, you're trading paper.
No, I'm not trading paper, honey. I'm trading paper for oil and then the oil later for more paper, but occasionally ducats and gold and things of that
and
nature.
Silver.
No.
No, you got out at silver, right?
I got out. I don't get out. I don't get out. I hold because it's real. I can't just get out. It's in physical silver. And they don't take that at the store, but they will. But I have a lot of metals as well. I have
Sure.
spent a significant portion of your income on metals in the past month.
I will tell you this. I'm fine with that. Have you
I know,
seen how
God.
metals have been doing?
If we'd been getting, listen, Eric Adams, if you'd been getting paid in gold when you were the mayor, you would be better off than if you'd get.
Have you
getting paid
seen
in
all those
Bitcoin.
guys that are like, look at the gold chart versus Bitcoin?
Yeah. Yeah. They tried to put gold on the internet, but it turns out that gold is the best thing about gold is it's real.
That's so true.
I do want to thank, first of all, but actually before we end and before I forget, I want to thank everybody who talked to me and showed me around Minneapolis. I'm not going to name any of you or even give any identifying characteristics of you. But I very much enjoyed spending my time with everybody out there. And I had great hosts. And, they have a thing called a meat raffle out there, Liz?
I mean, raffle?
Yeah. The Midwest is something else.
What is
man.
it?
What it is exactly what it sounds like.
It doesn't sound like anything. They raffle meat?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So you know how like people in like
is it like a whole cow situation?
I it's unclear. I'm not even sure if they even know anymore. I think it's just they're been doing it for so long that it's just I don't know. But yeah, they'll take some people will bring meat to the Elks Lodge or whatever, and they will fucking raffle that shit. The way it was explained to me, it was a little unclear on how actually even money was made, because I think sometimes people buy meat and then raffle the meat, but maybe people are buying so many meat raffle tickets that actually you do make money off of it. It's weird. Maybe they take the meat. And yeah, they also have a form of gambling at bars out there that I really liked called pull tabs.
Okay. Well.
Yeah. Gambling's awesome. But it's really bad.
Well, here's some more TrueAnon special reports. Can you play the music? And we should say, since I'm sure people are mad we didn't say it at the beginning of this episode, yes, we know there's been more Epstein files
Oh my
released.
God. No,
Yes,
Liz, we don't know.
We don't know.
No, we don't know. In fact, you have to tell us. Oh my God, I'd love it if you told us.
Listen, we've been making our way on down, making our way through these files. There's so many.
There's 3 million. And I'm sorry. What, do you expect me to read all 3 million in one day?
I think they do.
I was reading this shit in the car when we were like chasing people. And when we were idling, I was just looking up the must
I
stuff,
fucking hate the federal government because the way they rolled this shit out, it is
I know.
so annoying.
I know. Well, dude,
I'm like, you guys, I hate transparency.
well, and you know what?
Can you just like collate this somehow? Make it make sense somehow?
Just organize it in some way, or the fucking shit that they do. We'll complain about when we actually do this. But the thing that pisses me off, you don't need to make a separate PDF for one email and then another PDF for the reply to that email.
Oh, I'm going to tell you this. How about this? Why don't you just be so incompetent that you give us the unredacted emails and then in the same tranche, copies of them redacted?
Yes.
So
Yes.
you confuse them. How about this? Why don't you, not knowing what any of the things are because they're just named 01, 02, 03, 04, and you're trying to be good and do your job well, so you're going through all the files, your ass is fucking stuck for 4 hours looking
Yeah.
at scans of a fucking race car driver's checkbook.
Well, when you told me that you'd been looking at that for 3 hours, I was like, at a certain point, Liz, you got to know when to.
But you don't know what else is in there.
You don't know what else is in
There was so much stuff about Southern Trust. There's so much, but it's all jumbled.
It's all jumbled.
And
It's all jumbled.
sick of it. It's enough files.
I did search a certain bad word and found some crazy Peggy Siegel emails, though. But I'll send those to you
She's
later.
wild. that
Wow.
woman.
What an emailer, though. What an emailer.
Yeah.
But
Anyway,
yeah, she's
we'll talk about
wild.
that next episode. We got a couple episodes coming out about that.
We got
so.
a couple episodes.
Until then,
right.
I'm Liz.
My name is Brace. We are joined, of course, by
Producer Young Chomsky.
And this has been TrueAnon. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Jeffrey Epstein.